If you know anything about media, you'll know that one of the biggest draws is all about self-indulgence and wish fulfillment. There's just something about finding a show that caters so well to your specific interests that it becomes a mainstay in your media diet. Over the last couple of years, it seems that this aspect of media is becoming misplaced, as the big entertainment companies are trying their hardest to create properties that cast as broad of a net as possible, but fail to have any kind of lasting impact on the people watching them because they've become less like beautifully crafted meals and more akin to fast food. They're basically copying an existing successful model and pumping out these shows and films that have all of the elements of the stories people love, like Mission Impossible or Indiana Jones or The Matrix, but with absolutely none of the substance that made those franchises so memorable. They're basically just checking off boxes for tropes and premises that have worked in the past and that people say they liked. And because of that, we're getting the same storylines, the same kind of character tropes, the same cinematography over and over and over again. And that is probably one big reason as to why independent media has experienced such a gigantic boom in the last half decade at least. For pretty much this entire year, I've been observing and making videos on various topics to do with indie animation in particular, and never has this stance rang so true. The people helming the many indie shows and films and projects currently all have a very specific vision of what they want that doesn't line up with what could be considered globally appealing. And instead of being subjected to the whims of someone else's pockets, they decided to take matters into their own hands by creating works that have a much sharper scope in terms of who these stories are for, which I believe has become the secret ingredient that many larger conglomerates appear to have lost. Art is so important to us as people because even though everything can be considered art, we all interpret things differently, and all manner of different things appeal to different groups or communities. Trying to pander to as many people as possible might work occasionally, but it's these more personable works that are able to own that they are of a niche that can sometimes wind up breaking containment and surprising people. I've been wanting to have a proper look into wish fulfillment and why it's so important to art and entertainment for ages, but it's just such an enigmatic topic that it's a bit of a difficult one to properly pin down. How exactly do you quantify something like that? It's a massive thing, isn't it? So instead, I thought it would make more sense to look for some clear-cut examples. And lucky for us, as I continued keeping tabs on the different corners of indie animation online, one particular niche began to really stand out. And it's through this niche that I was finally able to puzzle together what I mean. So without further ado, hello everyone. My name is fionapollo, and today I will be looking at the topic of wish fulfillment in indie animation. And in doing so, I will also be delving into a case study all about the rise of the Black Magical Girl, or the Magical Black Girl, whichever way you prefer to specify. But no, I chose this both because it ended up tapping into my own childhood love of magical girl shows. When I was really small, Cardcaptor Sakura, or Cardcaptors, aired on CITV for a brief time on UK television, and I remember watching it with my mum, so there's a lot of nostalgia there. But also because this emerging trope in the indie scene has ended up spotlighting a long overdue message that Black women and girls don't really get to be at the centre of these magical adventures, and they deserve to be just as much as anyone else. Thinking on it, the only two prominent dark-skinned magical girls that come to mind in Western media are Tarani from Witch, or Layla/Aisha from Winx Club, and though they are important in their respective stories, they're not the main protagonists. So we're quite overdue, I'd say. But if you prefer to hear it from someone other than me, two indie creators in the space were kind enough to talk with me about both the topic and their own series. We have Brianna Navikis, creator of the Three Tomes, and Elizabeth Ababio, founder of Prosperity Studios and creator of Paragons of Zithia. So if you're interested to hear more, then please keep watching, and if you have a fondness for indie animation, please consider liking and subscribing, as I have many more videos on the topic that you might enjoy. Let's go!
Hello, my name is Brianna Novitskis, or just Bree preferred. My pronouns are she, they. I am probably at the time of release of this video, 33. Well, but right now I'm 32 years old. And I am a storyboard revisionist in the animation industry. I'm also a mom. I'm married, and I'm a former advocacy leader. I used to run and co-created and co-founded the Black advocacy org called Black and Animated, and I've worked in the animation industry professionally for about almost 10 years at this point. At Disney TVA, that's a Fox, Cartoon Network, brief stint there, and also Wild Canary Animation in both the production and the storyboard, like revisionist side of things. And I'm also an indie showrunner, which is why we are here today. And my project is called The Three Tomes, which is a Black magical girl witch project. It's about a Black teen girl in the 2010s Midwest named Tammy Harris. She accidentally becomes a witch all of a sudden, after reading from an ancient tome that has 13 spirits inside of it. And now she's got to capture those spirits again, but also face off against a mysterious foe that's after her and her friends while dealing with two vampire boys that are after her heart. It's very self-indulgent. It's Twilight minus the racist parts, meets Cardcaptor Sakura and Sailor Moon. So just take the YA vampire drama and smack it together with the magical girl genre. That's what it is.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Bobbio. I am the founder of Prosperity Studios. We're a 2D indie animation company, and we just started about a year ago. Our main goal is to keep 2D animation alive through creating thrilling and heartfelt shows. So shows that you can watch with your family that will be fun for the kids, colorful and everything like that, but also engaging for the adults so that we can all sit together and watch it collectively.
Picture this. You're a young girl growing up in the early to mid 2000s. It's either the early morning before you have to go to school or the evening before you go to bed, and you're watching a couple of shows that don't look like other cartoons that you're used to. For one thing, the main characters are all girls, just like you, which was surprisingly uncommon at the time. And not only that, but most of the entire cast were girls as well. This really resonates with you as, at the time, many cartoons swung the opposite way and would often only have one token girl thrown in with a group of boys, and her involvement in the action would be pretty minimal, if at all. But in these cartoons, in Cardcaptors, Sailor Moon, or Mew Mew Power as they're referred to in the West, this group of girls were the heroes, standing front and center who worked together to defeat evil creatures or villains, all while balancing their schoolwork, friendships, and love lives as well. They made you believe that you could do anything, that you could really be the protagonist of your own life, that your own experiences and skills are important, and that you can grow up to be someone truly magical. And even though obviously not everyone is going to be interested in the magical girl genre, that I think is one of the pillars of its general appeal and the appeal of most wish fulfillment media. It's this combination of self-indulgence, personalized fantasy, and imagination that lets you craft a world where you feel completely within your element. Or in a similar respect regarding the creators of said media, it can also be a deeply personal attachment to the story that allows them to express their innermost thoughts or desires to their audience. For example, if we want to go back and look at some historically successful animated films that managed to do this completely outside of magical girls, Pixar is probably one of our best points of reference. Films like Up, Inside Out, and Coco all had these very intimately personal narratives surrounding its characters, which resonated with many collective groups of people. Inside Out chronicles the life of a young girl moving to a new place and wrestling with longing for her old life and coming to terms with her emotions. Up tells the story of an old man who wants nothing more than to carry out the lifelong wish of his late wife and ends up going to extraordinary lengths to do so. And Coco stresses the importance of family love and understanding in the face of uncomfortable circumstances or truths. Each of these films focus on specific life stages or paths and harmonizes them in a way that anyone, regardless of whether they are an 11-year-old girl or an 80-year-old man, can relate to them. The incredible thing about playing into your own personal wish fulfillment is that when done right, parts of the experience can be felt and shared by far more people than what the initial perceived demographic might suggest. Hence why so many people could relate to Carl wanting to carry out the wish of his lifelong best friend without being 80-year-old widowers themselves, or of Miguel wanting to forge a connection with music while still being accepted and loved by his family, despite him living in Mexico and the setting being tied to the Dia de los Muertos. But even with that said, a lot of these characters and stories are chosen because they represent the majority or the standard for what kinds of stories get to be showcased. As well as that, there are only so many iterations of the same experiences you can relate to for so long. Like, yeah, finding something you can relate to in another person's story is fine, but sometimes you want to see stuff that caters more so to you and your own interests. Sometimes you want to be the main character. And what has popped up in recent times that runs parallel with that is the eradication of media aimed specifically at teenagers, which tends to be a critical time for developing your sense of identity. Quite a few video essay YouTubers have spoken on this already, but essentially, teen media in Western entertainment, which had its high points between around the 1980s to the early 2010s, acted as a kind of transitional space where themes of teen rebellion, changes in lifestyle and circumstances, and the importance of growing into your sense of self seem to have dwindled, most notably since the rise of streaming services where teenagers might be sharing viewership algorithms with both younger or older members of their families, and thus are getting squeezed out of the equation.
When we were making our show, we really struggled to decide what the demographic would be because we knew that we wanted it to be gender inclusive, and we also knew that we wanted it to be a show that young children would be able to look at the characters and say, oh, that looks like me, I can dress up as them. But we really struggled with the age group because, like you said, with animation right now, it's either shows for young children like Bluey and then older shows like Castlevania. There's no in between, and I think that's something that we're seeing as well with just the world in general. When I was was, again, I feel like an old person when I'm saying this. I'm not old. I'm a millennial, but when I was a kid, I had sites like Barbie. I had sites like MySpace. I had sites like Bratz and other sites like that were targeted for the tweens. There was like teenager magazines and stuff like that we could look to. And then somewhere along the way, I'm not sure what year it was, that kind of shifted. And now teenagers right now, they don't have any media. They aren't able to go to malls because malls, they tell them to get out because they're either being too loud or too rambunctious or something like that. And they can't go to parks because those are being overrun, and they don't have anywhere to hang out, basically. And the media that they have now, I mean, I will knock the show because I'm not a fan of it and I don't like the director. Shows like Euphoria, right? That are clearly made for adults, but the audience that they're marketing it towards is teenagers. And I think that's wrong because yes, adults can play younger characters, but the stuff that they're doing in Euphoria is not good for young brains. Those are the kind of shows that teenagers have right now. And it's scary to me that they don't have anywhere that they can say, okay, this is a show made for me. It's okay for me to sit down and watch this. My mom doesn't have to worry about walking into the room and seeing something inappropriate on the screen. My parents don't have to sit down and watch with me and then turn it off when certain scenes happen, like with 13 Reasons Why. They don't have to worry about that. I think it's kind of lost media. And I think that it's something that we should be able to bring back, because why is it that only young kids and adults are allowed to enjoy media right now? I think that's wrong. I think teenagers should also have something that they can watch. And so when we were making our show, we said, well, of course, younger kids are going to watch this, but we also want to make sure that this is geared towards teens and young adults. So we're going towards maybe 10 years of age to 30. Like that's the age demographic. So anyone within that bracket can watch, but anyone older can also watch. We can throw in some jokes there for the older folk, but it's mostly for teenagers, because I think that teenagers are missing a lot of enjoyment right now. They don't have anywhere to have fun. And I feel like that is really sad. And so we're trying to bring it back right now.
The teen years are a bit of a funny age in media. You're obviously not a kid anymore, so a lot of kid-specific shows are going to feel either too dumbed down for you, or if you do enjoy them, indulging in things that are viewed as below your age range will brand you as childish. But then the alternative would be shows made for adults, which can often have themes or storylines that aren't really appropriate for underage viewers, because unfortunately, due to the frontal lobe still developing, a lot of teenagers tend to soak up information by emulating what they see in an effort to fit in, rather than deconstructing it like what an older person is more likely to do. We also have the dilemma of teenagers wanting to be treated fairly and taken seriously, which for many often gets mistranslated to behave like an adult, which can push them even further towards media that makes them feel like they have to grow up quickly to be accepted. All of which has led to the decline in teenage-oriented shows that strike that balance of fun and whimsical, but still earnest in what is often a very transformational and turbulent time in their lives. And I don't personally think that it's a stretch to assume that that's why anime in particular has become such a huge influence on teenagers around the world. Anime has what feels like a much broader sense of freedom in regards to what shows become adapted from which manga. I'm obviously not too sure how Japanese entertainment operates in terms of which properties get chosen, but it definitely feels like they approach it with a more understanding view that you cannot please everyone. And in order to make something well, it has to be something that people working on it enjoy and relate to in kind. Compared with Western media that tends to approach things with a layer of humour attached, whether it be self-deprecating or satirical or otherwise, anime is often more forthcoming and willing to feature teenage protagonists and centre their struggles in a way that legitimizes them, rather than belittling them. They're allowed to be emotional or a little bit melodramatic, and unsurprisingly, when they're not being ridiculed for having emotions every 5 farts, teenagers tend to respond pretty positively to those kinds of portrayals. Both shonen and shoujo anime have been shown to have really positive impacts on teenagers who are able to use them as an outlet for certain emotions or experiences that they feel aren't properly represented in more local media. And I think this positive impact is also the reason why so many people my age and even older still look back fondly on these shows many years later, because, as obviously shown, teenagers have even less media made for them now than we did at their age. So it makes sense that in a movement dedicated to creating your own projects, a significant number of people would choose to create similar works that they would have loved to see themselves if they were teenagers again in the current day. So yeah, TLDR, I'm never going to riff on teenagers for liking things like Has Been Hotel, because if we're being completely honest, what the fuck else is there? What else do they have? Like, come on. So we spoke a bit about her in the previous section, but I think it's important we properly lay out what is meant by a magical girl for those who maybe don't frequent the genre. And while it might sound like what it says on the tin, a girl who is magical, that can also encapsulate some other nods or indicators within it. And to this end, I sought out a little bit of help. When you actually think of a magical girl, like, in your mind's eye, like, what kind of figure stands out? Like, who is she?
A magical girl is someone who, has powers. This might be a hot take, but she does not have to transform. I know some people think that she does, but magical girl or magical boy, I do not think that they need to transform. They come into their power, and they're like, hero's journey vibes, right? They come into their power. They have the call to adventure, and they're someone who stands up for their friends, saves the day, might be a little reluctant to it at first because this is something that they're pushed into, or they might be eager to do it and they are a hero figure to the people, but they have their own strengths and weaknesses and struggles that they work out with their friends and the people beside them, and they grow from it. And I feel like that's kind of who magical girl is. And I know that that's sort of vague because it's oh well, that's just a hero, period. And magical girls are just heroes. It's just that what separates, in my opinion, Mahou shoujo from, I guess, Western superheroes a little bit is a magical girl or magical boy, what have you, is typically younger, more coming of age, I would say. And there's sort of more elements that deal with just sort of being young and growing from a lot of that, I would think, and how magic and their powers play into their daily life and how it shapes them as a person. Hey, low-key, Diana Prince, you're a magical girl too. She is. She's Diana. Wonder Woman, you're a magical girl.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the kind of character that pops into your head?
Well, first of all, it'll be Sailor Moon. And for young teenagers, it would be Sailor Moon. And then for kids, it would be Sakura from Cardcaptor Sakura. I love the fact that we are getting these really cool, different variations of magical girls. They're not all cookie cutter, the same shape and stuff like that. I really love the fact that people are putting their own spin on the magical girl theme. And I think that's really great.
A magical girl is someone who, to me at least, kind of represents the revelry of youth and innocence. The genre itself is often seen as a coming-of-age narrative aimed at girls, or those wanting to become more in touch with their inner emotions as a means of coping with the world around them. A lot of the time, as a magical girl grows into her responsibilities as a beacon of justice, she also becomes better able to adapt to her civilian life changing as well. This may well be one of the big indicators of why young or teenage girls love the genre so much, because it's one that so many of us can relate to at its base level. Look at characters like Usagi, for example, Sailor Moon herself. When she begins her journey in the first episode, she is the biggest crybaby you could come across. And she also happens to be in junior high when the series begins. But by the final season in Sailor Moon Stars, while still maintaining her usual clumsiness and happy-go-lucky attitude, Usagi has matured into a natural leader for the Sailor Scouts, and is also now in high school, and she gets engaged. We're just going to ignore the part where she's engaged at 16. This can, of course, also have the added connotation that perhaps a reason why so many people relate to these characters is because they were forced to grow up too quickly. Just like Usagi, who was more or less thrust into this huge responsibility of fighting evil despite only being a 14-year-old kid, a lot of kids sadly don't get the privilege of enjoying their childhoods or adolescence. They'll have responsibilities, challenges, or even dangers that they have to learn to navigate in a world fraught with uncertainty, and as much as we wish that wasn't the case, it can't always be avoided. But these stories will often have the characters grappling with this in a way that viewers can truly empathise with on a personal level, making the portrayals that bit more impactful. In a way, the magical girl acts as a kind of time capsule where young girls and boys can envision themselves having the kind of childhood or adolescence they never actually got to have. It's also important to make the distinction, as Brianna did, that despite the name, they're not actually always girls. There are in fact some magical boys both in indie, like in the case of Fly by Jason Raymond, and in mainstream anime as well. Though anime magical boys tend to be more of a comical satirization of the trope. One of the best subversions I've seen of that, though, actually comes from webcomics. There is a brilliant webcomic titled Magical Boy by Vincent Cow on Tapas, all about a trans boy called Max who inherits magical girl abilities from his mother, and while the outfit and abilities start off very feminine, as the story progresses and he grows more into his own sense of self, his outfit and powers also transform and eventually align both more visually and metaphysically with his masculinity. Oh god, I'm dying. Fuck. I'm alive. I'm alive. Okay. fine. It manages to capture the exact coming-of-age vibe while also subverting the very gendered nature of the trope, as even though we did say there are magical boys, the trope at large still plays quite heavily into gender roles for the most part. But regardless, this is a persistent aspect of these stories that plays the struggles of young people earnestly and seriously compared to other types of media. Though Pretty Please I Don't Want to Be a Magical Girl also falls into the camp of satirization, but more or less nails the more cartoonish comedy pretty damn well.
If you die in real life, you die for real.
That's generally how it works, yeah.
But that said, why does such a prominent component of Japanese media resonate so well with audiences outside of Japan anyway? Well, to be honest, that feels quite simple. The creators of these stories are primarily making them for girls, not necessarily just Japanese girls, and as such, many of the issues these characters face are pretty universal. A lot of people go through school and have to deal with becoming integrated into their own social dynamics, and the usual inclusion of a team of magical girls means that this can be explored in a variety of ways. Maybe you do well in school, but struggle socially and find yourself alone a lot of the time. Maybe people find you too intense or intimidating. Maybe you're dealing with bullies. Maybe you're not that great at studying and are worried about your future. Or maybe your home life isn't great and school or your friends wind up being your personal escape. These are all things that people can relate to across the board, and it doesn't even just have to be school. These situations happen in the workplace or other such community spaces, so it's no wonder that creatives from all manner of backgrounds are latching onto it. I think the evergreen sense of optimism in these shows also helps a ton when it comes to the outlooks of people who gain attachments to them. I mean, if a piece of media you love carries the message that you can do anything if you put your mind to it, and you decide to put your mind towards creating your own version of it, why wouldn't you? Also, there was a whole thing when representation started becoming a bigger conversation in the 2010s where one of the most common rebuffs to this discourse was, if you don't like it, well, make it yourself. So a bunch of people naturally were like, you know what, yeah, I am gonna fucking do it myself.
I remember seeing like Kiana like doing doodles of Pretty Please stuff, and I was like, oh, that's neat. I want anyway over here. And then I remember Pearl doing Wheels and Roses, and I was like, wow, that looks cool. I'm gonna be over here doing my thing. So it was just like, and I'm sure that they all thought the same thing, being like, wow, that's cool. I'm gonna draw over here though, you know. But I think that's just like very funny and very beautiful that like we all sort of like latched on to the Maho shoujo genre and want to see Black girls represented in it because it had such an impact on us to the point where we're like, I'm just gonna do it myself. You know. And then, you know, and we support each other with it as well. Like I remember everybody's like rallying on Kiana, everybody's rallying for Pearl when they dropped their stuff. Like people were like sharing my thing around, Kennedy, you know, doing their Kickstarter. So it's all really great and like uplifting and supportive.
And honestly, I'm here for that, especially in the current landscape of limited opportunities. This feels like much more of a precedent than it did in the past when we were experiencing a boom of original ideas in mainstream. Something that is also very prevalent in these magical girl stories, if you haven't already cottoned on from the themes of love and friendship, is this enduring sense of community that permeates not just in the shows themselves, but in the motivations behind many people creating their indie projects. Both Brianna and Elizabeth, but also multiple other people working on their own projects, stressed the importance of wanting their families and communities to have something that was made specially for them, whether that be just for the kids of that community or the whole family, adults included. But it was a really heartwarming realization that so much of the motivation behind them was to pour a seismic amount of love and passion into something that could inspire those sentiments in the same people who instilled them in the first place. And this is not just something limited to the Black community, by the way. There are so many people who want to create works that center and inspire the people who mean the most to them. Families, friends, acquaintances, fans, or otherwise.
One of my biggest inspirations actually is my mom, because back then, when I was around 10 years old, she is a single mom and she was working 2 jobs to take care of me and my 3 younger siblings. And through all of that, she would always find time to sit down and watch a TV show with me because I'm the oldest of the 4. And that was our girls' night. Back then, I had I don't know what the word is, affiliation for anime and cartoons. Although she had no idea what it was, she didn't understand why I loved watching Naruto and Bleach and Inuyasha and Dragon Ball. She would sit down and watch it with me. And so that's what we would watch at 10 p.m. before I would go to bed. So I wanted to, now that I'm an adult and I have had all this experience working in the live action sector, and I never lost my love for animation, mission. I wanted to create a show that would exemplify that, so that when she sits down to watch it with me now, she'll be like, oh, that looks like the shows we used to watch together, just me and you at 10 p.m. And luckily my mom, she's a really wonderful woman. She's the type that will encourage you if she sees that you have a dream, and that dream can first of all make you money, but also that it's something creative that is engaging and that will keep you out of trouble, kind of. So she really encouraged me to get into the arts, and she encouraged me to continue doing creative writing. And so now that I am old enough to create my own show, I wanted to make something where I could basically say, here, mom, this is the proof of all the hard work that you've put in. You can watch it with me as an adult now. We can sit on the couch and see it together.
Initially, the 3 tomes was just, it started off as an idea where it was 2 girls just ghost hunting in a graveyard, and the black girl who had no name yet with glasses, she was like summoning her grandma with a Ouija board who had just recently passed. And that came from, honestly, me just going through processing my own grief, because my grandmother passed away several months before I moved to Los Angeles. So she passed away several months before I moved to Los Angeles, and several months after I had graduated college. She had kept her cancer diagnosis from me because she wanted me to focus on school and not get distracted, and she didn't want me to worry. But I eventually found out, and I wasn't mad at her, obviously. I was just very sad, because it kind of felt like, well, damn, I could have been with you even more if I had known, instead of just doing this. But she said that was why she wanted me to focus on school. But yeah, so I kind of put that in the 3 tomes a lot. This character who is processing grief and dealing with that with a grandparent.
There's just this sense of selflessness to it all that also plays into these narratives when you look at some of the more climactic moments. Even in the darker iterations, like in Madoka Magica, it's common for many magical girls to act selflessly in defense of other people, or to make an honest endeavor to understand and empathize with their adversaries. And violence is often a last resort when such attempts have already been exhausted. And I think this is another one of those heavy hitters for why marginalized communities in particular gravitate towards this trope. Like, even I can speak as a gay person and also someone with a disabled sibling to how we're taught to practice tolerance in the face of people who make no effort to do the same. Doesn't matter if you're black, gay, poor, disabled, or what. It is constantly drilled into us that we have to act with grace towards people who don't respect us or other people. And at least with the magical girl, she is rewarded with this virtue by way of either bringing someone around to her way of thinking, or by vanquishing a far-gone foe. In a sense, this can also have a bit of a religious angle as well. Good will always prevail over evil, those who believe will be rewarded, and those who don't will face judgment, and that kind of method of thinking. There's a lot you can dig into with these themes and messages when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, but I'm not gonna go into all of that right now because that's a whole other conversation. So let's just keep it moving.
And I think having a Black girl at the forefront is very beautiful and very important, because Black women in media and Black femmes in media in general too, you have disposable Black girlfriend tropes or Black best friend tropes on the side. And when you see Black girls or Black femmes in media, they're either just like a stepping stone in relationships. We don't really get too many opportunities for being in the forefront of like YA, for these coming of age stories. Yeah. And kind of throwing like the Maho Shoujo label on it, and like throwing those like kind of tropes in the mix there, with us taking the reins and telling those stories, allows us to smash those tropes and be able to just tell a story of these Black women, femmes, and boys in this way where we're not typically represented.
So at the end of all of that, why is the Black magical girl in particular being held in such high regard right now? From what I've heard from both Brie and Liz in our talks, but also from comments that have been left here and there, the Black magical girl trope both acts as a positive and affirming portrayal of the age-old coming-of-age trope that anyone, regardless of background, can relate to. But with that said, it also does highlight a couple of shortcomings when it comes to the portrayals of Black women and girls in media that a good chunk of these creators are looking to correct. For one thing, Brianna mentions the disposable girlfriend trope. This is an occurrence in media where women are placed into a narrative solely to enter a relationship with a member of the core cast to advance their development in the story, only to be discarded, usually in favour of one of the other main cast members, and is never mentioned or heard from again. And this unfortunate fate is disproportionately doled out to Black women. In the 3 tomes, Tammy is a subversion of this by not only being a protagonist, but also being the main object of desire being pursued by 2 different people, and also being bi because we stand by women on this channel. Bi women are fucking awesome, but it is an an unfortunate reality that romance for black women is often portrayed in a lot of popular media as a temporary state and rarely has any sense of permanence. If anything, this has ironically become a common criticism of the girl power movement that worked towards moving women's portrayals away from purely romantic on screen and instead manufactured a lot of these strong independent woman archetypes, which on its own isn't bad, and it was quite progressive for its time, except when you realise that black women were historically never even allowed to be love interests until much later in media than white women, and then you realise that they have far less on-screen examples of a black woman being the main object of affection overall. This also ties into the topic of blackness and femininity, since because we kind of skipped over having a lot of black women being portrayed as love interests and dove straight into the girl power movement, we then saw the evolution of the strong independent black woman who can do it all without needing a man by her side become the main portrayal shown on screen. And while, you know, from an equal rights perspective that can be good sometimes, it ended up becoming a very lopsided and warped interpretation to the point where black women were seen as less feminine and were pushed even further into this label of undesirability both by the media but also in real life as well. It irked me to no end seeing this because as soon as you connect the dots about how this kind of thing comes about, you start to see how it manifests in how other types of women or minorities are portrayed as well. Poor women are often viewed as inherently less feminine and deserving of love because they have to do a lot of things themselves and get their hands dirty. It's also not lost on me how this also plays into the whole thing of how women who put noticeable effort into looking good rather than naturally adhering to beauty standards are also seen as less desirable, because like 90% of the time this again disproportionately punishes black women, poor women, and so on. So yeah, there's my feminist rant for the week. But overall, I think people are going to have their own thoughts and opinions regarding the concept of the Black Magical Girl, what she represents and why, but for me, personally, she is a breath of fresh air, and lifting up the stories that center her very much puts a spotlight on the wish fulfillment aspect of indie animation's broader appeal. I like to think that lifting these stories up will lift others up as well and afford so many more stories of all types to be seen and enjoyed by those willing to give them a shot, whether you're like Brianna and making them purely for self-indulgent purposes, or if you're like Elizabeth and you want to create something special that your own community or family unit can call their own. I genuinely hope that the Black Magical Girl soars in whatever iteration he or she may take, and I wish all of these projects the best of luck.
I just really want to tell a story about Black whimsy and showing us in a way that we just normally are not represented. Just a black girl being loved. I hope that Tammy and her friends and her love show to any black queer person that they are enough and how they present is enough and your queer identity is valid, no matter what type of relationship you're in.
I think that it's really cool what we're seeing right now, the different variations and the different ways that people are playing with the magical girl trope. It's not all the same thing, and I don't know, me myself, I love variety, so I'm just really excited for what's to come. Thank you guys so much for, first of all, supporting indie animation. We really appreciate it. Thank you for putting your time and energy into watching the videos that we've put out, the promotions, the ads, for buying our merchandise and just showing up. We really thank you guys, especially for my own studio, Prosperity Studios, and my show, Paracons of Zithia, me and my crew, and soon the cast. We're going to be putting out a casting call soon. Check out that. But we really appreciate it, guys, because we've been working on this project for a little over a year. It's been very hard. So thank you guys so much. Please continue to support all the shows that you want to see, so that we show the studio that they should be looking into us and they should be supporting us, because we may just have that next IP that they're looking for.
Thank you for watching, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Some of you might have seen the short that came out the week before this video, which was done to help give one last little push to the 3 Tomes Kickstarter before it wrapped up its campaign, and I am happy to report that they surpassed their goal and even hit a couple of stretch goals as well. Elizabeth's teaser trailer for Paragons of Zithia has also only been out for a little over a month or two now, so please go and support and keep an eye on Prosperity Studios as they continue to put things in place. It'll be interesting to see what they do. As for me, this is now my last video before taking a break in August, where I'll be working on stuff for Mint and Friends and a larger video as well, so please look forward to that. I'll probably still be posting things in the meantime, so you'll still hear from me, but I need a break. Okay, I need a break. Speaking of which, I'm actually becoming a lot more active on Instagram now. I deleted Twitter and TikTok properly from my phone, and it has been great. I'm not spiraling anymore, and the Instagram feed is a lot more artist-oriented and way less toxic, thank God. I've also been finding a lot more projects on there too, actually, one of them being a British Magical Girl indie series, and it's making me insanely happy. So yeah, thank you all again. Please support indie animation, support the Black Magical Girl, and I am gonna go and play some Zelda. Thank you as always to my wonderful Patreon supporters. Thank you to my YouTube peeps, Mystic Mind, Lauren R, Ash Valentine, Lonim the Her, I Am Nail Smith, Craig, Edboy, Pedanti Cat, Steph Goes Doodles, Why Not Warrior, and Taishan. And an extra special thank you to my indie production supporters, Manuel Lexon Gonzalez, Morgan LaFeda Thin, Matty A, Kiyoshi, Round Cat, Arsonist, Bobco Pictures, and Kids of Today. If you're interested in joining the Patreon, a link can be found in the video description. Stay safe everyone, and I will speak to you all very soon. Stay magical. Bye!